To prove an argument is a valid argument, first we assume all the premises to be true. Under this assumption, we check whether the conclusion is always true or not. If the conclusion is always true, whenever the premises are true, from the definition of validity of argument, the corresponding argument will be what? Valid argument. If there is a case where the conclusion is false, whereas the premises are all true, then the argument will be what? Invalid argument. So let's take example. Show that P implies negation Q. Q, therefore negation P is valid. So you are required to show this is a valid argument. You have two premises and one conclusion. So like I said, to prove, first we assume all the premises to be true. In this case, we have two premises, so we let the two premises to be true. So let's take Q, the first premise, let it be true because it is what? A premise. And again, let P implies negation Q be what? True, because that is what? The second premise. So by assuming these two premises are true, we are going to check whether negation P is always true or not. If negation P is always true, then the corresponding argument, the given argument is what? Valid. So in the first assumption, Q true, and the second assumption, P implies negation true, means the possibility, the truth value of P will be what? False. Because if Q is true, negation Q is what? False. So in order P implies false to be true, the only option for P is what? False. Unless P is false, the second premise will not be what? True. So we can decide P is false from the first assumption, number one, and the rule of implication. So if P is false, our conclusion, negation P, is what? True. That means the conclusion negation P is true whenever the premises are what? True. So this will prove that the given argument is what? A valid argument. Let's take another. Now for the second example, I'm going to consider an argument based on a verbal statement. So it says, it is not sunny this afternoon and it is colder than yesterday. The first premise. If we go swimming, then it is sunny. Second premise. If we don't go swimming, then we will take a canoe trip. Third premise. If we take a canoe trip, then we'll be home by sunset. The fourth premise. Therefore, we'll be home by sunset. We will be home by sunset. That is what? A conclusion. So to check whether this argument is valid or invalid, the first step is what? Converting the verbal statement into what? Symbolic form. Remember, yes, we are not going to bother about the real meaning of the statement in the argument. What we need is the key points. The key point mentioned in the given argument, whether the afternoon is sunny or not, colder than yesterday, going to swimming, taking a canoe trip, will be home by what? Sunset. So basically, we have what? 5 points mentioned in the given argument. So we are going to represent these 5 points based on letters, the usual letters. P, Q, R, S. These are the usual letters to represent a preposition. So let P stands for it is sunny this afternoon. Q stands for it is colder than yesterday. R, we go swimming. S, we take a canoe trip. And T will be home by what? Sunset. The 5 points are represented by 5 letters. So the first premise, it is not sunny this afternoon and it is colder than yesterday. It is not sunny means negation P, and which is conjunction, negation P and Q. The second premise, if we go swimming, if R, then it is sunny. If R, then P. That means R implies P, the second premise. The third premise, if we don't go swimming, that means if negation R, then we'll take a canoe trip. That is S. If negation R, then S, that is negation R implies S. The third premise. And the fourth premise, if we take a canoe trip, that means if S, then we'll be home by sunset. If S, then T, that means S implies T. So we have 4 premises and a statement next to therefore, that is the conclusion, will be home by sunset, that is what? T. So we convert the verbal statement of the argument into what? Symbolic form. So to prove this argument is valid or invalid, we start by assuming all the premises to be true. Based on that assumption, we check whether the conclusion T is always true. So let's start. The first premise, negation P and Q, let it be true. The reason, because it is premise. So negation P, it is true. So if negation P is true, Q will be what? False. Now from the second premise, R implies P, let it be true, because it is what? Second premise. Always we let the premises to be true. So in order R implies false to be true, R must be what? False. If R is false, negation of R will be what? True. Considering number 2, rules of negation and implication. Once we know negation of R is true, the third premise we let negation of R implies S to be true, because it is what? The third premise. In the fourth step, we know negation of R is true. So in order true implies S to be true, the only option for S is what? True. S has to be true. Otherwise, the third premise will not be what? A true statement. So if S is true, then in order S implies T to be true, which is the fourth premise, S implies T. In order S implies T to be true, since we know S is true, T has to be what? True. The only option for T is what? True. So, by letting all the 4 premises to be true, we get what? T, which is the conclusion of the argument, is always what? True. That means we prove that the given argument is what? A valid argument. So this is the way we apply the formal proof to check the validity of an argument. Thank you and see you.